Guys, I'm always happy to welcome back to the podcast my friend, Eric Metaxas. He's a fellow Salem radio and podcast host, the nationally syndicated daily radio show, The Eric Metaxas Show. He's the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Is Atheism Dead? The new book, Letter to the American Church. That's what we're going to talk about. By the way, you can find him at ericmetaxas.com or metaxastalk.com. Eric, welcome to the podcast. You are a prolific guy. I think we had you on, 6 weeks ago to talk about your last book, but this is an urgent enterprise that you've undertaken, the new book, Letter to the American Church. Talk first about why you felt this sense of urgency and what is it that you're trying to say here.
Thanks, Dinesh. There's really nobody who gets the urgency of where we are better than you do. So it's a joy to speak to you and to your audience. We are in a battle. We are in a war, an ideological war, but at its heart, a spiritual war. And my contention in this book, I've never written a shorter book. I've never written a book that I felt greater urgency about. I've never written a book that I felt was more important. And I rushed this to publication because it's my contention, my horrible contention that the silence of the American church is precisely the same as the silence of the German church in the early to mid-30s when the Nazis were on the rise. And it is precisely because of the silence of the German church, which I know from my research in my Bonhoeffer book, it is the silence of the church in Germany that led to the rise of evil and to horrors unimaginable to the people at that time. So what I'm saying, genuinely, with no hyperbole, I cannot overstate it, is the silence of the church today on all of the issues surrounding us, cultural, political, is scandalous, it is sinful, it is leading to things genuinely similar, if not worse, than what the silence of the German church led to. So this is a cry from the heart to beg my fellow Christians to take this very seriously. The German church did not heed the voice of Bonhoeffer, and we saw what happened. What I'm saying is the voice of Bonhoeffer speaks to the American church. Today, will we hear what he has to say?
Eric, when people think about Nazism and the rise of Nazism, they tend to automatically start with the Holocaust. They start with the 6 million, the gassing of the Jews, Dachau, Treblinka, and so on. That, of course, did occur in the latter part of the war, the so-called final solution. But I take it that the parallels that you're drawing, you're not saying that we're gassing Jews or anybody en masse in this country right now.
Not yet. That's kind of the point. Nobody could conceive of that. But what they did in the early 30s led directly to those horrors. We don't know where they'll lead, but I guarantee you that they're leading to similar kinds of things if we don't speak up now. But that's the point. They couldn't imagine it. And that's why they were silent, because they thought this can't happen here. This could never happen here. Many American Christians, if not most, think the same thing. And worse than that, pastors and prominent Christian leaders are being silent, some of them even advocating silence. Andy Stanley wrote a horrible book where he's advocating that the church not be political, not understanding that is not biblical. We are called to speak truth under any circumstances, and if your enemies call it political, you wave it away. You say what God tells you to say. So we are in a tremendously similar situation.
Let's probe those similarities, if you will, because people forget when we think about jackbooting and we think about Nazis and the sort of guttural slogans and so on. We forget that Germany was the most civilized nation in Europe. It had a kind of renaissance from the late 19th century to the early 20th century. Great scientists, great music, great philosophers. Germany was kind of making the rest of the world look stupid for about 50 years. And the point is that the Nazis, far from claiming to be barbarians, claimed to be the true inheritors of this great tradition. And this is part of what made Germans think, man, we have developed all the sophistication and education and knowledge and culture. Surely this kind of thing can't happen here.
That's precisely the point. It's hubris, it's arrogance, it's blindness. It is our sin nature that says we're different. That could never happen here. Let those hotheads get thrown into concentration camp. Let them get arrested by the Gestapo and held for questioning. I'm just going to keep my nose down, and I'm just going to profit off of whatever I can profit off of. I just don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to lose members of my church. The fact of the matter is that there are people today who refuse to speak out because they say, well, that's not a gospel-related issue in the church. They say, we're just going to talk about evangelism. That's complete baloney. There's no such thing. If you don't speak up when tremendous injustice is being perpetrated, when the FBI is raiding pro-life people, you don't even have to be pro-life. You have to say, is this how we behave in America? We're seeing everywhere we look examples of horrors, but people are thinking, well, if it doesn't happen to me, maybe I'll keep my nose down and this will pass. That's precisely what led to the nightmare of the rise of the Nazis and all that followed, and we are doing it here today.
Let's take a pause. When we come back, Eric, I want to ask you whether this problem that you're diagnosing very accurately, is it the function of just human cowardice, or is it the function of some kind of theological error, or both? We'll be right back.